Welcome back to Mike Loves Fanfiction. So it has been a while for all of you guys of watching this video. See my beautiful face. Just gonna have a new haircut and all. And I'm back with a brand new content that I'm gonna love to show you guys, for reading and stuff. And I have more fanfiction reading to do, and we're gonna see how this goes. So today I'm gonna be reading. This is gonna be a chapter 11, third or 11 chapters for this big. And guess what? I'm bringing Name back into its life. So we're gonna have another fiction, another fanfiction for Voltron. Yeah, yep, you heard me. I'm gonna have another Voltron fanfiction. It seems a lot of people don't care about it. I might do it, but we'll see. Alright, this one is called Love Me Twice, Save Me Thrice. Okay, I'm just gonna read down the summary. But first, this is a rating is mature. I know how to read what are the ratings, the categories, and all that. If you watch the video of Cole Destings on how to read fanfiction, that link is in the description below. For now, let's get into what Love Me Twice, Save Me Thrice. It's about. So the rating is mature. So there's gonna be a lot of stuff. Category is MM, so it's a male. Fandom, Voltron, Legendary Defender. Relationship is Keith Lance. And then for characters, we got Keith, Lance, Shiro, Honk, Edge, Katie is her real name, Shay, Allura, and Lotor. Oh, we have a Lotor coming on. Great. So there's some additional tags. Modern with magic, it is AU. It's a modern, but with magic. It is one is Fae, a modern fairy, and it's a modern fantasy. Mutual pinning, magic, strangers and others. We have Fae of Lance, half Fae of Keith, Fae of Shiro, Fae Allura, Fae Hunk, Human of Hedge, Tattoo Parlor, Fairy Courts, got Blood, Violence, Eventual Smut. It's coming in handy here. Falling in Love, Fate, Trust, and Pixie Dust. Yeah, we have some modern fantasy going on here. We have like modern, so what we are now, but there's magic involved. Okay, let's see what happens. So, published this earlier in a July the 29th. Now updated in October 7th. No, October 7th. Yeah, it's October 7th. There's over 140,000 words, and right now she has 10 chapters. There are supposed to be 11 chapters. So okay. Oh, I don't know why I'm looking myself in the mirror. There are 11 chapters. So he finished 10. So he needs one. Okay. Alright, so let's get along to see what this summary. Let's get to the summary of what this story is. Okay, so here we go. Twice, say me thrice. Keith has always lived his life by a few simple rules that boil down to one ultimatum. Never let the fairy, never let the fae know he's an iron blood. The byproduct of the rare union between the fae and the human. He's seen as dangerous, able to harness the power of his fae bloodline without the drawbacks that keep them in check. He doesn't remember much of his life before Shiro found him, but things have been pretty good since. Despite the fact that his guardian turned brother figure as is a fae, but his best friend is a droid, and his dog is a blink wolf. His life is pretty ordinary. That is, until he runs to a beautiful fae with eyes like ice and touch like fire. A fae that makes him want to break the rules and calls out to a part of him that's remained shrouded for so long. With their lives irrevocable intertwined, drawn to one another despite all the warnings, they're set on the path that threatens to destroy who they are and save who they might become. This course of love never did run smooth. It is a modern fairy AU featuring Faye Lance and half Faye Keith. Again, I don't know why I'm focusing on something else. Get me in the mirror? No, you won't be able to film me in the mirror. Let me check though. You see me right there? Hopefully you see me there, because you're about to read one. Yeah, it is. Okay, we are. So I'm about to read this first chapter of Let Me Twice Save Me Thrice. So how about give the round of applause? No applause, please. Start this pick immediately. All right, let's go along with this. Let's do chapter one. See how this plays out. Chapter one. Never let them see you stare. Even on subway, Keith can see the faint fog of his own breath. He hunches further in the seat, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his leather jacket. He tucks his chin into the folds of his scarf, hiding his chapped lips in the thin layers of warmth. One earbud peeks out from the collar of his jacket, fitted snugly in his ear, and blasting pulsing waves of his traveling playlist. The other earbud hangs uselessly in front of him. Paranoia keeps him from using them when he's in public, not wanting to completely blind his senses that way. Sight is all well and good, but in a world where there are creatures who do as they please, being more aware of his surroundings is warranted. With the pause of music in one ear, he listens to the general din of the train with the other, the hum as they slide over the rails, the shaking of the train cars as they bump and shift, the low, hushed sound of voices deep in conversation he can't make out, the occasional sharper voice of someone who doesn't really care if they're overheard. He stares straight ahead out the grime-covered windows. It's dark as they speed through tunnels, and he's left to focus on his own reflection. Messy hair tucked beneath a black hat, lip ring hidden where his mouth is tucked into a scarf, but his eyebrow piercings glinting where his bangs part. Hunched and disgruntled, he blends in with the rest of the afternoon crowd. The people sway as the train moves, a forest of solitary beings, lost their own bubbles, trapped in time together, in the liminal space that travel on a subway provides, stuck in a moment of in between, waiting with blank faces and distant eyes, while his eyes fixate on his own reflection. He stays aware of those around him, keeping watch through his peripheral vision and the occasional drift of his gaze. It's a habit more than anything. It's very rare he ever sees one of them on the subway. They don't exactly like trapping themselves in moving contraptions entirely of metal. As they pull up to the station, however, and the darkness outside the window turns into flashes of concrete pillars and a blur of the crowd, Kate sees them. Not a lot of them, but they're definitely there. When the train itself is a nightmare incarnate for them, the stations are hunting ground. Thick with crowds and populated with people, only intent on their next destination. The unaware and unassuming make easy targets. As the train pulls to a stop and the blur of the crowd solidifies, he can see them. Their bodies shimmer faintly, skin and clothes and all. It's their inherent illusion magic, their glamour, the thing that keeps them hidden from the immortal eye. Wolves in sheep's skin. Humans can't see it, but Keith can. He can see the faint shimmer, the sparkle in the light, and when they shift just right, when they step into shadow, when he sees them just off the center of his vision, he can see through it. Glimpses into who and what they really are. He can see the horns, the sharp, inhuman faces, the large eyes, the strangely proportioned bodies, the teeth, the claws, the fur. The high Fae have less to hide, looking more like inhumanly beautiful mortals than anything. Simple coloring and marks set them apart. Fae like Shiro, but Keith can still see the vague shimmer of their clamor, giving them away for what they really are. Fae, inhuman, monsters. Except for Shiro, but he's a special case. He pushes himself to his feet with a handful of others, pushing his way off the train while others wait to push onto it. He weaves through the onslaught of the affluent crowd, careful to keep his distance from those he can see with glamour. He keeps his eyes up and alert, but never lets his gaze stick to one person for too long. Never a fey. Never let them realize you notice them. That's rule number one. Avoiding them is a close second. He makes his way to the back of the wide platform, toward where a couple people are pressed up against the back concrete wall. They sit out of the way, but clearly in the open. The man wears a beanie pulled down far, a few strands of stark white hair sticking out from beneath. The woman's hair is in long braids. Her beautiful face, a collage of dark and light from her vitiligo. They're both bundled up for the weather, but she looks far more put together than he does. It sits on a box drum, eyes closed and head bowed as he hunches over, hands moving in a complicated but steady rhythm. She sits on a blanket next to him, voice like a harp as she sings. A dog lays beside her, curled around her back. Rollo and Naima and their dog Breezer. Not so much his friends, but definitely some solid acquaintances. They didn't exactly get off to the best start. They tried picking his wallet, and he chased them down. They tried to get away with the help of their blind dog, but Keith had Cosmo with him at the time. A sort of friendship formed from then on, one based on the foundation of respect and understanding. Respect for the capabilities of each other, and understanding of the life they all live. Half breeds, iron bloods, a byproduct of the rare union between the Fae and the human, somehow born away from the prying eye of the courts and left to fend for themselves in the dangerous world, caught between the realm of ignorance and a realm that would rather see them dead. He may not be close with Rollo and Naima, but he trusts them a hell of a lot more than most. Not to mention, Beezer is the only other blank dog Cosmo's able to play with. He pauses in front of their busking station, pulling his wallet from his back pocket before squatting down. Beezer's head lifts immediately, eyes focusing in on him intently. One bright and intelligent, and the other clouded over heavily. He tosses a $10 bill into their heavy glass money jar before pulling the dog treat from his jacket pocket, holding it out for him to happily take. Keith scratches him behind the ears before standing, sliding his wallet away and nodding at Naima. Her lips curl at the corners in the ghost of a smile, nodding her thanks in return. Roll is too lost in his rhythm to notice. Then Keith walks away, leaving room for others to search for it and toss bills into their waiting jar. While Naima and Roll's music is good, Keith knows it's not the generosity of human nature that compels the crowd to toss change to the busking duo. He doesn't know what type of fey runs through Roll's veins, but Naima once confided in her siren genetics. It works for them, and he's happy for them. They managed to find a niche in a world where they don't fully belong. As he steps away, he feels his phone vibrate in his pocket, cutting off his music. He pulls it out, unplugging his headphones and swiping to answer. "What do you want, Pidge?" he asks as he presses the phone to his ear. "Coffee," comes her voice immediately. "Please, Keith, I'm dying," he sighs. There's only one place Pidge will drink coffee from these days. There's no way in hell he's going there. Get Sheer to go for you. He's booked solid all the way up till 5. Then why don't you go? Because I have to be here to answer the phones and deal with walk-ins and... There's a muffled sound on what he presumes is her body flopping over something, followed immediately by a pitiful whine. "Please, Keith? I need caffeine, like stat. If you want me to be remotely personable today, I'll get your coffee, but I'm not going to shake." He zips past a thick group of people and finally reaches the stars, starting the long climb towards the daylight. No coffee other than Shay's is worth drinking. That's debatable. It's real not. Shay's coffee is quite literally magical, and that's exactly why you shouldn't be drinking it. Sheer says it's safe. Dude can't lie, Keith. I know, but he's nearly at the top of the stairs when he sees the flash of movement in a thick shine of glamour. It's heavily reflective, which only happens when the glamour's purpose is to obscure the Fae completely from mortal eyes, bending the light around them to hide in plain sight. The Fae appears at the top of the stairs, already rushing down them, not even bothering to weave between people, and heading directly toward Keith. He sighs, long and exhausted. Keith, hold on. He keeps his eyes resolutely ahead, gazing wistfully at the top of the steps. In his peripheral vision, he watches the shine of the Fae dart toward him, all but flying down the steps. He can't move out of the way. If he does, they'll know he can see them. And that's a big effing hell no. Better to take the hit than to let a Fae know he has second sight. So he continues forward, bracing himself in that last moment. The Fae collides hard with his shoulder, shoving past him without remorse, and continuing on their way as if he were nothing more than a fly being batted away. His momentum shifts backwards, balancing being thrown. His foot slips more than he anticipated, and in one terrifying moment, he realizes he's falling. He feels the lurch in his chest as his heart leaps into his throat, arms flying out in a futile attempt to save himself. There's a brief and terrifying moment of weightlessness before he collides with something solid, abruptly stopping his fall. Time stills. People move around him. He can see his breath fog in the air as it leaves his lips. He can feel his heart pounding against his ribs. And slowly, he becomes aware of the fact that he's caught against a man's chest. One hand on his arm and the other wrapped around his waist. The body behind him is warm. Heat sipping through his layers far more than it should, but it's somehow more comforting than it's alarming. And that, in and of itself, is alarming enough to jumpstart him back to the moment. Sorry, I. He shifts away forward once more, getting his footing and bounce back as he turns to face the man who caught him, only to have his words die on his tongue when he realizes he's not man at all. He's a fae, and he's beautiful. Sharp features, dark skin, smooth as silk, darker dots of freckles cresting high on his cheekbones, and a nose that tilts up just a fraction at the tip. Chestnut hair that wisps around his features. Tall, broad-shouldered, lean and lithe, dressed, strangely enough, in an oversized jacket that blends in perfectly with the casual crowd but looks oddly out of place with the clean crispness of his otherworldly beauty. His eyes, however, are what captures Keith. Blue. Blue like a crystalline sky at dawn. Blue the darkest ocean during a storm. Every hue in between colliding and pierced together in fractals of color that seem to shift with the light. Eyes that capture Keith's gaze and hold him frozen as something works its way through him. It starts in his chest, spreading like ice through his veins, cracking and splintering until something warm and molten oozes out, sinking deep into his core and settling with simmering, radiating heat. Every breath is cold, bringing the sharp edge of uncertainty and fear creeping through his lungs. His heart batters against his ribs, tearing and bruising, but his chest is warm, and the warmth spreads until it tingles at the tips of his fingers. His head swims, vision blurring in that chaotic sea of blue, and something eats at him. Something in the shadows of his mind, just out of reach, just at the tip of his tongue. Something strange and foreign, yet creeping forward with an inherent certainty that can't be placed. A man's lips curl at the edges into a lopsided smile that lifts his cheeks and crinkles the corners of his eyes, light dancing in depths. You should be more careful. His voice is low and private, lilted with playfulness that clashes with the fact that it's strangely breathless. It's his voice that jars Keith out of his thoughts. A voice like honey and silk, like the crackling of a bonfire in a cold beach beneath the stars. A voice that tugs at something he doesn't have a name for. I. His voice doesn't sound like his own. Easily lost to a rumble of an oncoming train. He needs to stop staring. He's breaking rule number one, but he can't. Somehow, the idea of looking away that makes his chest ache more than a twist of fear in his gut if it doesn't. This man is no ordinary Fey. He's a high Fey. He can tell from his glamour, a pierced fin, only obscuring some of the sharpness of his features, some coloring, and the marks on his skin. A thin glamour is all that's needed, but it's still strong nonetheless. It only appears as a faint shine when the light hits him just right, almost unnoticeable, much like Shiro's. A high Fey, a court Fey. He takes a step down, arm slipping away from Keith, and it's only then that he realizes he's been held this whole time, causing a whole new wave of heat to surge upward, warming his neck. Shame, embarrassment, something strange. A Faye that takes another step down the stairs, arms falling away from Keith with a lingering reluctance. His smile remains fixed in place, but there's something else in the depths of those eyes. Awareness, a wistfulness. I'll see you around, he says, taking another step away, and another. Each one seeming just as reluctant as the first. His voice is low and whispered, yet it rings in Keith's ears. It just sounds like a threat, yet instead it feels like a promise. One that has his stomach twisting itself in knots, and his veins buzzing with adrenaline. Keith, the faint sound of his name snaps his attention to the phone in his hand. Forgotten call with Paige still going. He frowns at it, lifting his ear. Sorry, Paige. His voice doesn't sound like his own, soft and strained, breathless and on the verge of cracking, though he doesn't know why. Are you okay? You sound like you just saw a ghost. When he looks back, the face is gone. Not a trace of him visible in the crowd. A shiver runs down Keith's spine. Right where he had been standing, a step below Keith, sprouting to cracks in the worn concrete, blooms a single blue forget-me-not. I think somehow we're getting to the meeting of this beautiful blue Fae that Keith has seen. And Keith just walking by and met with Pidge on the phone, and then he sees what is that blue Fae coming through? And there's the dog Rolo and Naima. Okay, yeah, but the most part, the very important part, is that Keith saw the blue Fae, and he cannot focus, but the blue eyes of that Fae is bizarre. He can't focus on anything else there, but my guys. That was weird, but in a beautiful way. Okay. All right. Let's might as well go along and see how this plays out. For the next week, he takes a different route to work, wishing for all the world that it will get warm already so he can take his bike again. He spends more rides, more antsy than usual, glancing around a little more often, eyes doing double takes whenever he catches a glimpse of shimmering glamour, flinching whenever he hears a melodic voice or laughter like bells. He hasn't been this jumpy since he was a kid, with Shiro constantly drilling into him the importance of keeping his secret. But no matter how many times he looks over his shoulder, no matter how often his gaze sweeps across the crowded platforms and busy streets, he has yet to see that same Fae again. It's strange. Fae are creatures of obsession. He has no doubt that he stood out to that Fae on the steps to the subway, their eyes locked for too long for him to doubt it. The reluctance to leap solidifies his suspicions, and the forget-me-not, well, that should make Keith fear what might happen next. It's that should that keeps him paranoid. It's the should that keeps him on high alert for that same face and that same curling smile. He tells himself it's because he should fear him. A face obsession is never a good thing. Being noticed by one rarely ends well, and he has more to hide than most. However, there's something else that thrives alongside his fear. Whenever he sees a flash of glamour catching the lights, whenever he hears a low laugh that makes his hair stand on end, adrenaline spiking, even if it's only momentarily. He tells himself that it's fear that makes his heart race, but he has no logical reason for why it sinks into his stomach when he realizes that it's not him, not the beautiful subway Faye. It feels an awful lot like disappointment, and the fact that he feels that at all is far more terrifying than holding a Faye's attention. The fact that he might want it. He shouldn't want it. He doesn't. They're dangerous. He's dangerous, especially to Ironbloods. Half-breeds aren't taken lightly by Court Fae. They're hunted, kidnapped. What happens next entirely depends on the Fae who founded them, on the court that found them. He has no desire to end up in the court. She'll drill a healthy fear of that into him, and he would know. He used to be a court Fae himself until he escaped. After a week without incident, he starts going back to his usual subway route, back to his usual train and his usual stop, back to tossing Naima and Rolo a couple of bills when he finds them set up on his platform, back to carrying around a couple of dog treats just in case he sees Beezer, back to his usual walk to work. He occasionally feels eyes on him, feels the weight of someone's gaze, but when he returns, there's no one there, Fae or human, no one watching him. The hair standing up on the back of his neck, and the crawling across his skin, a shiver down his spine. The only indication that his paranoia isn't completely unfounded. His instincts are usually right, and he's learned to listen to them. Still, he doesn't see the Fae from before, and he tries not to think too hard about the way his stomach knots, leaden and heavy. Oh boy, he's getting to his troubles in his mind of, getting paranoid and all. But that's like he can't stop with this Faye just staring at him. And look what happened in the past. He was in the court and escaped. Now he's going back to his usual stuff. What he's going to do, taking the routes, taking the bus stuff, with his bike, and taking to his work and going home. That's a lot, you know. But can't stand and breaking the cycle of his life. That's Kate's cycle, by the way. Since as you know. Alright, let's get into this incident. That's just 1 week. Now let's head to the 2 weeks. 2 weeks after the incident, Keith writes the whole thing off as a one-time event, and his paranoia settles back down to the comfortable baseline. His days settle back into their usual flow. The daily grind picks back up again. Home, work, home again. Spend his days with his friends and coworkers. Spend his nights with his dog. It's his usual and his ordinary. He should find comfort in it, and there should be no reason for him to feel the strange hollow in his chest that still hums dully with anticipation every time he comes across a Fae. And he comes across them often. The city is littered with them, glamour and cloaked in illusion magic to blend in with the moral world. They own businesses. They wander the streets. They play their games. Some of them choose to remain invisible to the human eye, going about their business in secrecy. He's used to seeing them, used to ignoring them, used to letting his gaze glance over them as if they aren't there at all. It's gotten to the point where some days he barely registers them, so caught up in the usual and the habitual that he goes through the movements, avoidance, blank expression, ignoring. He's been able to see them for his entire life, and there's no longer anything special about them. Most of them are little more than flies, a constant presence that he rather avoid and otherwise ignores. Most of them, anyway. There are a few exceptions. Show being the biggest. Hunk and Shay are alright, but Shay's Cafe and Hunk's restaurant cater too much Faye clientele for him to feel comfortable there. Even then, he only trusts them because Cheryl had assured him that they're safe. He has no such assurances about this new Fae. Better to hope their paths never cross again. Hope he doesn't so. 2 weeks, and now he goes back to this daily grind. And it feels all of a sudden that hope it doesn't coming through this path between this Fae. Because this is it happens this is going to, going crazy, and he sees in this vision that, oh boy, what's going to happen? Is there going to be another Fae? There's going to be another person? Or both? What's he going to do? Oh boy, this is a Philip Rushman's moment. That's just an event. The rumble of his bike beneath him is familiar and comforting. It vibrates through him, rattling his bones and fueling in warmth in his core. Leather seat snug between his thighs, helmet snug on his head. On his bike, he feels powerful. He feels in control. He feels freedom. He can go fast. He can weave through obstacles. He doesn't have to worry about avoiding eye contact with passing Fae. Here in the wind, nothing can touch him. Spring weather is finicky at best, and unpredictable at worst. But the moment a day arrives that's warm enough to warrant taking his bike to work, he snatches up the opportunity with vigor. The air's still cold, and there's a bite to the wind that nips through his layers, but it's worth it. The adrenaline buzzing through his veins keeps him warm, and a familiar excitement warms his core with nostalgia. The only unfortunate part of driving to work is the fact that the last part of the drive is through the city, which means thicker traffic and more stoplights. He rolls up to a red, keeping several feet between his front tire and the bumper of a car in front of him. Combat boots on the asphalt for balance. He sits back a little, waiting for the light to turn. Impatience flits through him, but there's the prickling at the back of his neck that's new. Instinct has his head turning before he realizes what the feeling is. His eyes sweeping past the cars around him, over the people moving along the sidewalk, right over a familiar face in the crowd. His eyes snap back, locked onto a blue gaze that has shivers running down his spine. He's wearing his helmet with a tinted visor, and yet he swears that Faye is looking right at him. Feels their eyes locked no matter how impossible it seems. It's the same one from before. Same casual oversized jacket that blends him into the crowd, but stands out against his polished face. Smooth, dark skin, weaving chestnut hair, eyes like the sea and the sky melding together, features pointed and angular, with a faint shimmering of glamour that makes it look like tiny crystals hiding beneath his skin where the light hits. He stands on the street corner, still as a stone in a river of people. His hands are in his pockets, posture casual but body fully facing Keith. And slowly, so slowly, Keith watches his lips curl into a lopsided grin. A loud honk makes Keith jump, head whipping forward to find that the light has turned green, and the car in front of him is already speeding away. How long he had been frozen there, staring down a Fae. Dangerous, his mind whispers. Sound an awful lot like Shiro. Leans forward, grabbing the handlebars and revving the engine. Lifts one foot off the ground, bike already starting forward. He glances to the side once more, gaze pulled there by a sharp tug he can't ignore. But the face gone, and Keith peels away from the lights, heart's hammering painfully against his ribs. A hum of energy buzzes through his veins, and adrenaline far too sweet to be fear. We're on to the sense, and the second incident happens. And he's in the middle of the stoplight, and then all of a sudden, he sees another Fae coming through. The same Fae that he saw before. And keep an eyes on that that blue Fae. Whoa boy. He gets a lot of attention, he can't focus on anything else. What's happening? What is happening to him? Alright, let's just go over there. Get into all this explanation coming through. His home isn't the biggest nor the fanciest, but it's home. A simple two-bedroom house with a sizable living room, a decent kitchen, and a large basement that him and Shiro have designed to be their own personal gym. And the best part, it has big backyards that's unruly and unkempt, but perfect for Cosmo to run around in. It's the home Keith has grown up in ever since he was a teenager, lost and alone, and Shiro took him in, located just outside the city in an old neighborhood that presses up against his forest, close enough to the bustling city to keep most Fae away, but close enough to nature that Shiro doesn't feel out of place himself, within walking distance of a train station, fitted with a garage for Keith to work on his bike. It's perfect for them, and has been for 10 years. He lounges on their worn leather couch, propped up against pillows, legs stretched across the cushions, snuggled under a blanket and trapped by a large dog lying across his legs. Cosmo's head rests on his stomach, and he idly runs his fingers through the thick fur, eyes on his phone, scrolling through the apps with his other hand. The TV plays across the room, giving off the only source of light. He hasn't bothered to get up and turn on the lights since the sun went down. He hadn't had appointments, so Shiro had let him go early. He spent the evening ordering takeout, training in the basement, and taking a long hot shower, and finally curling up with Cosmo to binge Netflix. Despite the late hour and the fact that the parlor closed 2 hours ago, Shiro isn't home yet. He said he was going out with a friend, he said. Like he's too embarrassed to admit he's with Adam. He told Keith not to wait up for him, but that's never stopped him before, and it's not going to stop him now. Call it paranoia. Call it a habit. All he knows is that whenever Shiro's out late, he can't sleep until he gets home. Maybe he just doesn't want to sleep until he's certain that Shiro is home, safe and sound. Maybe he just can't sleep alone for fear that Faye might find him, though that's never been an issue in the 10 years they lived here. He doesn't know. He doesn't think too hard on it. It's been a habit since he was young, and Shiro would find him passed out on the couch and have to carry him to bed. Either way, he's not as worried now as he used to be. There's not the overwhelming itch of anxiety, and he doesn't flinch at every sound or creak of the house. Shiro can fend for himself, and so can he. He can take care of himself. Shiro made sure of that. And besides, he's not alone. He has Cosmo. The wolf lifts his head, ears perked, as he swivels around to stare out the back door. Golden eyes, bright and intense. Keith's gaze snaps to him immediately, feeling the way the wolf tenses in his lap. Cosmo's nostrils flare, eyes briefly flashing as a shiver runs through him, briefly disrupting his glamour as his fur strips color in a wave before returning to its normal, moral state. He's a flurry moment, leaping over the back of it and pulling up abruptly at the door, nosing the seam of it and whining impatiently. Heat freezes, air filling his lungs as his heart clenches, tight and painful in his chest. Then he's off the couch in a moment, throwing a blanket off of him and rushing to the back door, fingers hesitating on the handle. He squints through the glass door and into the dark of the night. He can't see anything, not a shadow or shift of movement, not a sparkle or shine or glamour. But that doesn't mean there's no one there. There's only one Cosmo ever gets like this, and that's if there's an intruder on his territory, and it was startling enough to cause his own fey energy to flare, then he should stay inside and keep Cosmo with him. They're safe within the threshold of their home. Still, there's an itch beneath his skin and a tug in his chest. He opens the back door, and Cosmo darts off into the night, hit a wave of cold air. Keith shivers, but he steps past his own threshold all the same, driven by curiosity and a tug he feels pulling against the rapid beat of his heart. The stone patio is cold against his bare feet, the air crisp against his exposed skin, the chill sinking easily past the thin material of his worn t-shirt and loose pajama pants. Running his hand through his hair, he closes his eyes, inhaling long and deep. He holds it until his lungs ache, and then lets it out slowly, forcing his body to relax. He feels magic unwind from his core, uncoiling from the tight knots he keeps it in, unfurling in long, wisping tendrils that lick through his chest like tongues of flame. Warmth seeps into his veins, bubbling in his blood and chasing away the sinking chill, until his body stops shivering and he feels more control. His eyes open, adjusting to the darkness. He feels stronger like this, with his own magic diluting the blood in his veins. It's comforting and familiar. It makes him feel whole. But it's dangerous, and he'll deprive himself of this warmth on a daily basis if it means Faye won't be able to sniff him out. Creeping forward, he follows after Cosmo with slow and measured steps. His shoulders hunched slightly, right arm held out at his side, outstretched, palm up. The symbol on his inner forearm aches, pulsing with a need, poised and ready. He feels the sharpness of the dagger present against his skin, just below the surface. Feels the tip of it digging into his palm. His fingertips tingle with anticipation. Their yard is a wilderness, chaotic, and yet strangely designed. Their grass is long and soft, but never grows too much, thick and polished against the soles of his feet. Their tall fence is covered in vines and lined with shrubs and trees. Cheryl's garden, tucked close to the house, looks unkempt, but it never grows weeds. Cosmo sniffs around the corner of the yard, nose to the ground as he paces. He lifts his head as Keaton nears, ears still perked forward. "What is it?" Keith asks, voice a whisper. Cosmo meets his gaze, golden eyes sharp, but he tilts his head to show his confusion. His ears swivel, and he turns away, nose back to the ground. He paces the yard once more, moving from the spot in a winding circle. He feels himself relaxing, the anxiousness slipping away as Cosmo continues his search, intrigued but no longer on guard. The sharpness under his skin fades, the pulse in his forearm dissipating, the vibration in his veins eases away, and the lashing of his magic calms into a softer pulse of warmth, just enough to keep the chill of the night at bay. Whatever Faye had been near their home is gone now. Probably just passed through their yard and had no idea the home was inhabited by a half-breed and a blank wolf. But because curiosity is a powerful thing, instead of going back toward the house, he steps forward instead, moving to get a good look at the spot Cosmo had already been inspecting. The air freezes in his lungs, lips parting as his eyes widen. There, growing instantly in the corner of their yard, is a thick cluster of blue forget-me-nots. He knows he should ignore them, perhaps burn them. He knows he should go back to the house with Cosmo and lock doors. Maybe call Cheryl and finally tell him about the Fae he ran into on the steps to the subway. His head aches, whirling and dizzy, shouting at him to run, to get past the threshold of his house where the Fae cannot follow. But while his head swims, his heart burns. He finds himself kneeling in the sea of grass, finds himself reaching out with his left hand to gently cradle the flowers, while the dagger presses out of the palm of his right, nearly cutting the flowers from the earth before disappearing back into his flesh. And only then does he stand, flowers held close to his chest, and hurry back into the house. Cosmo follows at his heels, and Keith casts one last look over the yard before sliding the door shut, locking it, pulling the curtains close to keep them hidden. Keith has trouble sleeping that night, even after Cher gets home, curled up in his bed with Cosmo sleeping at his back, eyes gazing across the dark room to where the cluster of forget-me-nots sit innocently in a glass of water. He hasn't told anyone about the Fae he keeps seeing, and he doesn't know why. He brings the forget-me-nots to work with him the next day and sets them up on a station, and he doesn't know why. Cher's gaze narrows in on them, lips pursed into a small frown, but he doesn't ask, and Keith doesn't tell him, and he doesn't know why. Okay, folks. There's a lot of situation going on, but oh my god, what is happening right now? He is now has his house with Shiro, and all of a sudden, there's something going on in the backyard. And Cosmo falls over and sees the forget me nots sprinkled all over the place. But it's oh boy, it's not looking good for Keith. It's not really that safe, you know? It's not that safe. He sits back on a stool, eyeing her critically, lips pressed into a thin scowl. Pidge! He calls, calling out her name. What do you want? Comes the reply, slightly muffled through the walls but sharp all the same. Come here. I need your opinion. I'm busy. If you want my input, you come here. Signing, he scoops his iPad off the desk, rubbing his eyes as he makes his way out of the back room. He hasn't been getting much sleep lately. Every time he gets to the cusp of unconsciousness, he wakes with a start, torn from dreams that are fragmented in shadow, blurred and scratchy in his memory. The main room of the Black Lion Tattoo Parlor is wide open in space, divided into a wall of tattooing stations, a corner of couches to lounge in, and the entryway, decorated simply but impeccably. Forest green walls and imagery of plants and forest scenes, metal decorations hanging made from bronze so Shiro can actually touch them. He heads through it to get to the glass double doors, leading back to Pidge's piercing sanctum. One of the doors is ajar. You can see her inside, sitting on a stool and organizing the jewelry they keep in stock. Hey, he says as he enters, moving to lean back against the counter beside her. What's up? She asks, straining and turning to try to get a peek at his iPad screen. He holds it out to give her a better look. I'm working on the design of Matt's tattoo, and I want your input. What you think about this one? Paige hums, taking the tablet from him and using her fingers to turn and zoom in. Eyes narrow and lips pursed in thought. He waits, arms crossed loosely over his chest. I feel like I like where you're going with it, she says, but I think it might be getting a little too complicated for Matt's taste. He wants something that looks simple, even if it's not, you know? He nods, lean over to shift the image on the screen. So what if I clean up this part a little bit? Got rid of the vines and made it more simple shapes. Interlocking to look more complex? Yeah, I like that. Maybe make the eye more geometric too. Less like a realistic eye. I can do that. He takes his iPad back. Lips pursed as he looks over the sketch. I'll clean it up and text him later to see what he thinks. The brass bells over the door to the parlor chimes. They both turn, despite the fact that they can't see the front door from his room. I'll play you for it. He turns back the page, who's already holding a fist out. Nope, he says, shaking his head. A triumphant smirk curls. I got the last walk in. This one's on you. God damn it, she groans, sighing off her stool and trudging toward the door. She points a finger at him as she leaves, eyes narrowed for good measure. But you have to get the next one. He gives her a small salute, still smirking as he looks back down at his tablet. The design for Matt's tattoo only requires a few more adjustments. He can probably get in for a real appointment soon, though he had said he wanted to wait until his next paycheck. Hey, what can we do for you? He hears Paige say, but there's something odd about her voice. It's briefly hesitant and the smile in her voice sounds strained. If he didn't know any better, he might have just chalked it up to a typical customer voice. But he worked with Paige for over a year now, and she's never more than casualty in unapologetically herself around customers. There was only one reason for her strained politeness. Faye aren't uncommon customers at the Black Line. While they have a mostly human clientele, and they don't exactly advertise to Faye, Shiro does have a few customers come in for more magical tattoos. He only caters to Faye he trusts, ones he knows won't cause trouble, and none of them know that Key and Pidge know of their existence. As far as the Fae world is concerned, Shiro is just a low-run, domesticated Fae with a human tattoo parlor as the front of the Fae tattoos he does on the side. And while he knows Pidge is perfectly capable of playing her role as an unsuspecting human, that doesn't stop him from moving forward, fully intending to place himself in the room as silent backup should she need it. Hey, his steps falter as hears the new voice, heart clenching and twisting. The hollow demon in his chest pulses, sending a ripping wave of static throughout Keith's body. He knows that voice, but despite how violently his body reacts, there's only one memory he can dredge up: the steps into the subway station. I'm here to see Shiro. He should be expecting me. Name's Lance. Right, sure. I'll go get him. He sees Pitch walk past. Seb's breast and clipped, not even bothering to glance in his direction, as she makes her way to the door leading to Shiro's office. Hey Shiro, there's a customer here for you. Moment catches his eye. Then steps only after Pitch, pausing in the middle of the parlor. Skin light brown, hair wind swept, body glimmering faintly, just the vaguest shine to indicate his glamour. Concentrated in his chair, ears and cheeks, hands shoved into the pockets of his oversized jacket. Keith's heart bruises his ribs, ears ring as a rush of adrenaline sweeps through his veins. But the Fade isn't looking at him. He turned away, eyes rolling over their tattooing stations, until he gets to Keith's. He freezes, and Keith knows exactly what he's looking at. A small bouquet of forget-me-nots sitting innocently in a small, cheap vase. They haven't withered at all since he cut them from his yard. Petals just as pristine as ever. A spot of blue in the forest of green and bronze. And Faye turns slowly, swiveling around to face Key where he stands frozen in the fusion room. His breath hitches when their gazes lock, unable to stop the wave of static that rushes through him, remaining as a vague tingle in his fingertips. The Faye's eyes are wide, uncertain and surprised. Lips lax and parted. Not at Keith's presence. No, he had found him pretty quickly. But at the flowers? Lance! Shiro's voice cuts through the room, snapping the Faye's tension away. His lips curl into a brilliant grin. Shiro! He steps forward to meet Shiro. Their hands clasping before the laggard man pulls him into a hug which this Lance melts into, tension leaking out of him. He just comes in to stare. Shiro is never this physically affectionate with any of his fake customers. In fact, he's only ever seen Shiro hug a few people ever, including himself, Pidge, Matt, Adam, and now this Lance. Come in. Let's speak in my office, he says as he steps away, turning and gesturing for Lance to follow, which he does, but not before turning back in the direction of the piercing room, not before meeting Keith's gaze once more, grin turning coy as he winks. I like your flowers, he says, voice a little bit loud enough to carry. Then he's gone, and the door to Shear's office closing behind him. He's not sure when he moved, but he finds himself standing in the door to the main room, having stepped forward, tugged by invisible strings, to follow Lance's retreat. Paige stands nearby, arms crossed over her chest and lips pressed to a small frown. That was weird. Yeah, he says, mouth feeling dry. Do you know him? She asks, sitting her chin to gaze in silence. No, he answers without hesitation. That's why I haven't seen the man before. He definitely doesn't know him. Yet, while he knows it's the truth, it tastes like a lie. Okay, so they're all of this. Now he works at the parlor, working on some tattoos for either a fae or a human or half a half human. And then comes along, there is Lance passing by and talking to Shiro. He wants to make Shiro for the office. That's very much weird. I don't know why he wants to talk to Shiro first, not Keith. Okay, that's weird. But Keith's just very nervous now, looking at Faye again. That have me not, that forget me nots. Wow. Okay. As we go along, let's keep reading from there. Lance stays the rest of the day, locked away with Shiro in his office. While he and Pitch try to eavesdrop, it becomes clear quickly that Shiro put a silencing charm on the room to keep their conversation private. When it comes time to clock out, they knock on the door to let him know they're leaving. It cracks open just wide enough for Shiro to tell him to go ahead, and to tell Keith that he'll be home later. He doesn't miss Lance leaning over in his chair to catch his gaze. Doesn't miss a coy smile that seems almost on the verge of shy once he's caught. And when it comes to the next day, he swears there are more forgiving knots in a vase than there were before. Well, probably more someday, but just we'll see that happen. Pitch sighs comes out as a low groan, her entire body slumping with it. Oh my god. Remind me to propose to Shay. I don't think that's a good idea, Keith says, lifting his own coffee cup to his lips. Heat radiates through it to seep into his fingers. Yet he knows it's never too hot to drink. When he sips it, the warmth floods through his veins, staying with him and warding off the chill. Just one of the many perks of Shay's infamous coffee. You're just saying that because she's Faye. Exactly. They walk along the brick path through the park, bundled up in jackets and scarves. Beanies slouched on their heads. With a coffee cup in one hand, he holds Cosmo's leash with the other. He doesn't need the leash, but the law dictates he has one anyway. He trots ahead of them, eyes snapping around the park and nose tilted to the wind. Unlike you, I don't have anything against fake human relations. It never works out, and it's dangerous. Might I remind you that your own lineage says otherwise? She says, voice casual but pitchful for privacy. On the corner of his eye, he sees her tilt her head in his direction, coffee cup poised near her lips. His scowls, eyes remain forward. And neither of my parents are around anymore. So one point still stands. It's dangerous. Yeah, well, if Shay provides me coffee like this for the rest of my life, I'm okay with living a little dangerously. Besides, Shay isn't like most Fae. Her and Hunk, I trust him like I trust Shiro. He hums his acknowledgement, though he's not sure if he agrees with her wholly. While he doesn't mind Hunk and Shay, he doesn't trust them like he does Shiro. He doesn't trust anyone like he does Shiro, especially if they no matter how amiable they may be. Your plan won't work anyway, he says. I'm pretty sure she and Hunk are together. Lucky bastard. They stop at the bench and sit down to enjoy the rest of their coffee. It's Monday, one of the only days the parlor is closed, and they decided to enjoy their free day with a round of Netflix binging, preceded by a trip to Shay's for some quality coffee and a walk through the park for Cosmo. A large canine sits at his feet attentively, back and straight and ears on alert as his eyes dart around the park. It's clear he's restless, eyes locking on a couple runners and a few glimpses of other dogs. He won't leave Keith's side, though, not unless given permission. Keith reaches out a hand, idly scratching between his ears and digging his fingers through his thick fur. A breeze tugs at Keith's hair, raising goosebumps on the nape of his neck. After a long commendable silence, Pitch asks, are there any around here? He hops a sharp breath. Voice a low deadpan says, they're always around here. It's the park. It's the closest they can get to nature in the middle of the city. He sees the roll of her head out of the corner of his eye, knowing that her eyes are doing the same. You know what I mean. Are you picking up anything? He asks, as his eyes are already sweeping across the park, making note of all the bright reflected gleams of glamour. Nope, but your eyes are worth more than my spidey senses. There are a few, he says under his breath, turning back forward, but none close by. Cool. She puts her coffee cup to her lips, tilting it back to drain it before setting it aside and rocking to her feet. Cosmo, what do you say to some fetch? She asks, stretching her arms high above her head. Cosmo's head snaps up, eyes zeroing in on her with his ears perked forward. He turns then, eyes seeking out Keith, head tilted to the side. Keith nods, scratching behind his ears. Go ahead, but no blinking. He gives a barely perceptible nod of his head, intelligence shining in his eyes. They're bright and golden, sharp with understanding. One of the only visible tells that he's no ordinary dog. Keith's magic pressed into Cosmo's blood keeps his fur a reasonable color, and a sense of his own inherent fey nature at bay. To any mortal, he's just a dog. To any fey, he's a suspicious dog, but nothing of interest. To Keith, he's just Cosmo, a blink wolf he found wounded as a pup and has raced ever since. His best friend and closest companion, his only comfort on nights where he was alone and woke from his nightmares with a scream frozen on his lips. Let's go, dude, Bitch says, begging to pick up a stick before jogging a short distance away. Cosmo follows at her heels, nearly coming up to her a race. When she throws the stick, he darts after it, rocketing across the field to leap and catch it midair, landing and running back, thankfully without blinking. A breeze rolls past him again, a touch of ice on his skin. He shivers, taking another sip of his coffee to warm himself. The breeze dies down, and he hunches further down in the seat, content to watch Pidge and Cosmo play. But then the breeze starts up again, and this time he realizes that it doesn't touch the rest of him. He doesn't feel it on the exposed skin of his fingers. He doesn't feel it on his cheeks. When he looks up, he can't even see a trace of it tugging at Pidge's clothes or Cosmo's fur. Yet there is definitely a breeze, and it's definitely treading through his hair, twisting and tugging at it, playful but deliberate. There's the cold touch of phantom fingers on his neck, whispering past the light caress of the wind. He shudders, slapping a hand over the back of his neck, almost surprised to find nothing there. He erupts at the spot, willing his goosebumps to go down, glancing around, and he doesn't see any Fae. But that doesn't mean they're not there. He pulls his hat down further before tucking his hand back to his pocket. But then the breeze starts up again, tugging at his hair, treading through where it curls around his neck. It feels far too deliberate, far too localized, and not at all natural. A shiver of fear starts to coil through him, cold and sour, curdling the blood in his veins and making his heart clench. Then there's a laugh in his ear, not heard, but not unheard, soft and drifting on the wind, a low rumbling chuckle, foreign and yet tugging at the frayed threads of familiarity hanging somewhere in the back of his mind. A puff of air against his ear, sending chills down his spine that vibrate to warmth as they near his core. A strange warmth, a warmth he blames the effect of Shay's coffee. He keeps his eyes on Pitch and Cosmo, ignoring the way the wind continues to play with his hair, ignoring how it tickles at his jaw, a ghostly finger stands across his nape, ignoring the phantom laughter bubbling on the breeze, ignoring the small smile that threatens to pull out the corner of his lips, unbidden and dredged up from a hollow pit in his chest that he's never been able to name. Okay, so down the work, they're out of from work, and they decide to rest and hang out with Pidge. Going to the park with Cosmo. And then while Pidge wants Cosmo to, play fetch, Key just sits down there and realizing the air is having something strange happening right now. There is a breeze coming through and plays along with her hair and all that. It's just a feeling, the touch of it. But that's odd. Oof, that breeze might have caught him. What's happening with that breezing thing? It's not that beautiful, isn't it? No. No, it's not beautiful. But there has to be. It has to be something that's quite more beautiful than you think. Alright, so I'm gonna stop here because it's 11 o'clock right now. I will go somewhere. We'll put this one to another portion so that we will get into this. So, Keith runs with only one earbud in, listening carefully past the pounding drive of his music, the beat of his footsteps, and the rush of his own breath. He doesn't let himself zone out, instead keeping a sharp eye on his surroundings, keeping a mental tally of all the Fae he sees, and making sure none of them pay much attention to him until they're too out of sight to worry about. And it's because he's keeping such a close eye on his surroundings that he sees it. A girl who can't be older than 20, dressed fashionably for the spring chill. No doubt one of the hundreds of the college students who commute through the city to their classes. She's pretty, but by herself, she's fairly unremarkable. Some that Someone that Keith definitely wouldn't have paid much attention to, if it weren't for the fact that he's following after a man who glimmers in the early afternoon sunlight. Keith slows automatically, pacing dwindling to a standstill as he watches. Hands falling to his sides as his heartbeat rages on. now with something other than physical exhaustion coiling tight in his limbs. Of the Fae is a tall man, with long dark hair that drips in a wind that touches no one else. He's dressed simply, no jacket and no shoes, making it abundantly clear that he's there for an easy meal and not to blend in. His skin is dark, but shines as if coated with diamond dust. He walks backward slowly but steadily, hand held out to the girl, urging her onward. His lips move, and while Keith can't hear what he's saying from his distance, judging from the girl's blank expression, he's willing to bet it's some sort of entrancement charm. He leads her toward the park's lake, stepping back into the waters without hesitation. His smile grows triumphant and eyes hungry as she takes her first step into the gently lapping waves. He knows enough about Fae to know a kelpie when he sees one. Keith's blood boils, heat unfurling his chest, and needles prickling along his veins. He feels the riven press of his blade beneath the skin of his forearm, sharp tip pressing at the underside of his palm, begging to be released. He grits his teeth, hands curled to fist at his side. He stands on the path that winds around the lake, far enough away from the pier to be out of sight among the trees that line it. But if he runs now, he can probably make it to her in time. He can probably drag her back out of the water, no matter how much she kicks and screams. He can possibly fight off the kelpie. But that would expose himself. It would be going directly against Sheriff's orders to be cautious and discreet. It would be alerting any Fae in the area that he has the sight. His wielding of a blood blade would tell him he has Fae blood. Still, he can't just stand by and watch her die. He doesn't know who she is, and it doesn't matter. She's an innocent, and he can do something to stop it. And despite the consequences, he knows he will. Body coiled tight, decision made, and stoking the fire inside him. He takes a step forward, right fist already uncurling to release his blade. He gets only 3 steps before there's a hand grabbing the back of his shirt, taking him roughly backwards and making him stumble. He lands hard on his backside, hands out behind to catch some of the weight. Gravel digs into the leather of his gloves. His head whips up, scowl in place, a bite of an accusation on his tongue, only for it to wither to nothing as he sees Lance standing over him. Blue eyes light and sharp as eyes, narrow as he glares down at him, hands on his hips. "What do you think you're doing?" he snaps. Keith feels his shock start to ease away, melting in the wake of his indignant anger, defensive in the face of Lance's sharp tone. "What are you doing?" Faye rolls in his eyes, lips twisted in a frown. "Stopping you from doing something stupid." He pushes himself to his feet, brushing himself off, blood burning his veins. "What I do is none of your business." "I'm making it my business." Lance's eyes narrow, challenge glinting in the eyes of his irises. Keith hadn't realized that they'd been leaning toward each other, arms crossed over their chests, until he can feel the cold wafting off Lance's skin. "Yeah, well, don't," Keith snaps. "Now, move." He takes a step forward, intent on shoving past Lance, but there are hands on his shoulder, pushing him back. "Oh, no, you don't. Nope, nah, not gonna happen." He's firm, resolute, but he's never been in the face of Keith's stubbornness before. He slaps the face hands away. "I just can't stand here and let her die." Lance's lips press into a thin line, and he turns away, glances over his shoulder to where the girl is already several steps into the water, moving toward the man wading chest deep. When he looks back, his eyes are still hard, but the color of them has shifted. Brighter blue, deeper, no longer the crystalline shade of ice. Lips still pressed tight. He says in a voice that's just as firm and unyielding, "She won't die." He glares, searching his face, eyes flickering over his shoulder to the girl once more. He opens his mouth to protest, but Lance beats him to it. "You stay here." Hands come down on Keith's shoulders once more, squeezing lightly, as if to ground him to the spot. His eyes flicker back to Lance's, finding them softened to match the plea in his voice. "Just stay here. I'll take care of it." "Hurry you!" But Lance is already stepping backwards, further down the path, eyes locked on Keith and pointing at him firmly. "Stay." Keith looks to the lake, where the girl is now knee-deep. Each step brings her closer to the Kelpie. With every step, his glamour wavers, distorting his features, beginning to show the shape of his true form. When he looks back to the path, Lance is gone, and that's when he hears a soft whistle melody. It dances in the wind, gentle and alluring, light and lilting. It weaves through the air, calling out to him. He feels the tug deep in his chest, feels the vibration of compulsion across his skin, feels the fuzzy lightness in the edges of his mind. He's been around Naima enough to know what a siren song sounds like. He shakes his head, dislodging the melody's tentative grip on him, but the whistle notes hold a steadfast grip on his heart, tugging at something that feels almost reminiscent. He feels his heart rate rise with the welling of a new panic. He's usually unaffected by siren songs, at least Naima's. He feels the allure, but his own fey blood keeps it from managing to sink into him. It works on the girl as well. He sees her steps falter, her eyes still dazed and blink rapidly as her body stills. Then, slowly, she turns, gazing at something in the trees. She then takes a step back towards land, and then another. The Kelpie's smile falls, twisting into a snarl of outrage. His illusion magic shimmers, briefly showing his equine features and black scaled skin, lips curling to show sharp rows of teeth. He moves forward, but the girl is already out of the water, and Lance has emerged from the trees, walking steadily toward the lake. Once he is visible, the Kelpie freezes, expression unchanging, body writhing beneath the water, but clearly unwilling to move forward. Lance stops when the girl reaches him, and the whistling fades as he speaks to her, voice too low for Keith to hear. Her expression is still lax, eyes blank and unseeing, but she nods, continuing a trance-like walk back up to the grass, toward the path and away from the lake, oblivious to the fact that her boots and pants are soaked, though Keith supposes getting sick is far better than becoming a Kelpie's next meal. Lance strides closer to the lake, stopping at the water's edge. He speaks to the Kelpie, and while Keith can't make out the words, he can see that the water is fey and is unhappy about it. But Lance's face is unyielding, and the Kelpie squirms under his gaze. He knows from Shear's lessons that the Kelpie fall under the jurisdiction of the Winter Court, but they are low on the hierarchy. If Lance really is one of Shear's old friends, then Keith's willing to bet he's one of the Summer Court, a high fae at that. Despite being of different factions, Lance will have far more power than the Kelpie. Now that the girl is no longer in danger, Keith finds himself stepping backwards. One step, then another, before turning and starting up his jog once more. Lane seems to have it covered, and Keith doesn't really want to stick around to talk when he's done. Especially when he doesn't know why Lance would bother saving some random human in the first place. Why Lance would bother trying to stop Keith from doing it himself. It could be a promise to Shiro, but there's something strange about Lance. Something that sets him off his guard. Something that makes his blood run hot and cold all at once. He's done a kindness today, but Keaton knows that Fae aren't inherently kind. He doesn't want to be fooled into thinking Lance is. That would be dangerous. So he puts as much distance between himself and the lake as possible. It's not until he's in the shower, getting ready for work, that he realizes that Lance never once questioned how Key was able to see the Kelpie for the danger he is in the first place. Okay, now, so we have Lance and then we have Key, and there is the Kelpie, or Naima. She's at the water, and then Lance has to move out of the way because the key might be in danger for what's happening, and see it happening to the Fae and getting along was being nice to the humans, but that would be very concerning to what would be the situation. But I'm just saying that there's a lot of things going on between Lance and Keith, but they haven't met. They haven't met yet. So we will just be trying to see how this story would play out. Okay, let's Continue. Again! Shiro shouts, voice racked as he leaps forward, arm counting down towards Keith once more. He swings his sword up, catching Shiro's arm on his blade and using his momentum to shove it off to the side. He then swings his arm back in a wide arc, forcing Shiro to jump away. Keith darts after him, swinging downward. Shiro catches his sword before it hits. His own arm crosses over his body to stop the swing. His body tenses, bracing as he extends his arm, shoving Keith's blade off of him and batting it to the side. Before Keith can recover, Shiro's other arm swings up, elbow cracking him across the jaw at the same time his leg hooks around Keith's ankle. He falls hard, breath knocked from his lungs on impact. He doesn't bother to get up, staring dazedly at the ceiling of their basement as the world around him spins. His chest heaves with every breath, skin sticky with sweat that soaks into his t-shirt. "You're rusty," Shiro says, leaning over him. He expects to tease, but the tone is unsurprisingly void of the usual lightheartedness. Instead, worry furrows Shiro's brows. "You used to see hits like that coming a mile away." Keith's lips pressed to a scowl, eyes narrowing to the man above. "We've been training for hours. Your endurance isn't what it used to be." Shiro's prosthetic shifts, unfurling from the form of a blade and twisting back into one reminiscent of his missing arm. The glow of it fades, magic fading back into its dormant state. Without his glamour to keep the limb from appearing like an ordinary metal prosthetic, Keith can clearly see the oak it's made from, as well as the pointed ears, sharper features, solid black irises, and body marks of his Fey heritage. He holds out a hand, and Keith sighs. He lets go of the handle of his sword, and instantly the blade's form dissolves, shifting back to molten purple shadow that absorbs back into his palm. He feels it shift under his skin, prickling like needles as it settles back beneath the symbol of his forearm. He doesn't know what it means, and Shiro's has only ever told him that it's evidence of his Fey blood. Once a birthmark, he's inked over it, fitting it into a tattoo of a dagger it forms when brought to life. The dagger sits inked into his forearm, blade tip pointing towards his palm, the symbol nestled into a gem at the dagger's hilt. The dagger is nestled into a bed of roses, thorn vines, and blue forget-me-nots. Something he designed years ago, but never bothered to ask himself why. It had just seemed right. With his blade stored back in his blood, he takes Shiro's hand, letting the man pull him to his feet. "My endurance is fine," he huffs. "You're just pushing harder than you usually do." Shiro opens his mouth to protest, but closes it shortly after. The way his expression pinches is the usual disgruntled frustration that follows when he catches himself in the midst of a denial he can't voice, as it falls too close to a lie. Sighing, he turns away, running his fingers through his hair as he goes to pick up Keith's bottle, tossing it at him. "We should start up regular training again. We need to start pushing you. You can't be getting rusty like this." She frowns, lowering the water bottle to his side. "Shiro, what's wrong?" He takes Shiro's shoulder, stiffened briefly at her question, only to relax a second later. "What makes you think something is wrong?" he asks, after taking a long, slow drink from his own bottle. When he turns to face Keith, his expression is carefully impassive, which only makes Keith's brows furrow more. "You've been more cautious lately. There's never a wrong time for caution. You're constantly looking out at the shop windows. You can ask us if we ran into any Fae any time we leave your sight. You don't let us go to Shades anymore. Yesterday you told me to change my running route to avoid the park, and technically forbid me from going near the forest." He takes a step forward, and Shiro looks away, brows pinched as he glares at the floor. Keith lowers his voice, trying to soften a sharp edge of his resolve. "I haven't seen you this paranoid since we moved here. Whatever's going on, you can tell me. I'm not a kid anymore, Shiro." "I know," he says, shoulders slumped as his eyes squeeze shut. "I know." He reaches out, placing his hand on Shiro's shoulder, hoping to ground him amidst whatever storm is brewing. "Just tell me what's going on." And then, because he's never had great control over his tongue, and curiosity is a beast he's never managed to tame, He says, "Does this have to do with that Fae who came into the shop a few days ago?" Lance? Shear's eyes snap open, looking at him sharply. Once, the inky darkness of his irises had been strange and foreign to him, straight out of a horror film, but he's since gotten used to it and has learned to read them. And right now, Shear's looking at him, sharp and startled, calculated, calculated gaze sweeping over his face. He tries to remain impassive and firm under scrutiny, and whatever Sheriff finds makes him relax with another long exhale. Yes, in a way. He looks away, gazes in. Lance is an old friend. He came to warn me. Warn you? Something itches at the back of Keith's mind, an energy that prickles beneath his skin. About what? It's the courts. Their relationship has always been a tumultuous truce, but they're becoming restless. Lance came to warn me. We don't want unnecessary attention drawn to us. He bites at his bottom lip, teeth lightly tapping against his piercing. They're not going to call you back, are they? He asks, voice soft and hesitant. Sharon never told him how much about his time spent in the summer court, but from what Keith has been able to gather, whatever exile he is under, they still hold some sort of sway over him. Sheer looks at him then, small smile and not quite reaching his eyes. I hope not. He places his hand over Keith's, squeezing it lightly. I'll do everything in my power to keep from taking me away from you. Or you from me. Something in his gaze hardens, lips pressing tight. I don't want to go I don't want to go back to the court anytime soon. Or ever, if I'm being honest. Keith feels a wry smile tightening his lips. You're always honest. Sure hubs, fighting down his own smile. Curse him being afraid. He turns away then, and in the air between them feels lighter. It's nothing to worry about for now. Just promise me you'll be careful, if only for my own peace of mind. I promise, he says without hesitation. Sure rarely worries about reason, and Key has learned to trust his judgment. Still, with all this talk of caution and avoiding Faye, there's something Key needs to know. Hey Shiro. Yes? He looks up from where he's leaning against one of the workbenches, phone in his hand. Keith's finger fiddled with the cap to his water bottle. About that friend of yours, Lance. Something flickers in Shiro's eyes, but it's gone before he can make sense of it. Can you trust him? I can, he says slowly and carefully. A hesitation not born from uncertainty, but from something else. And I do. Far more than most Fae. Right. He looks down at the bottle in his hand. His own tattoo catches his eye. Forget-me-nots mingled with roses. When he looks up, his lips are pursed. Can I? Shiro watches him for a moment, facing past it before melting into something softer, something tired but kind. Exhaustion lines his features, but there's the dim sparkle of what Keith dares to call amusement deep in the darkness of his eyes. I don't think my answer will impact your decision either way. His brows furrow as his scowl deepens, irritation sparking at the voice. What's that supposed to? Ready to keep going? Shiro sets his phone aside, striding back to the center of their sparring circle. He drops into a crouch, right arm thrown out to the side. The wood begins to glow, twisted lens of oak unfurling and reshaping back into a blade. Keith sighs, tossing his bottle aside and moving to stand in front of him. Mirroring his stance, his skin stings and his blood prickles as his blade emerges from his hand, solidifying as his fingers curl around the handle. Don't think this conversation is over. Shiro smirks. Wouldn't dream of it. Okay, so we have Shiro and Keith. Shiro had done going to court and don't want to get himself in trouble. Well, he had been getting himself in trouble a lot of times. Hope it doesn't do the same for Keith, because if that happens, man, we're in for a bad time, as you might call it. But that Lance there is that not Lance is Keith is worried about having doubts on the Blue Fae, Lance. Shiro has been trusted Lance for like a long time, but if he would ever trust Lance, I don't know, because they haven't met them yet. Remember, he is half Fey, half human, and Lance is a Fey. Let's see how this plays on this final part. This time, he feels Lance coming before he shows. The day is warmer than most have been, with the sun high in the sky and warmth radiating down with the promise of an end to winter. It's a day where he can loosen his scarf and unzip his jacket, where the air is cool and refreshing without being cutting. It's the kind of day where he feels content to sit on a park bench with his dog at his feet, enjoying the rare early spring sun, and where he doesn't look out of place staring at the lake across the way. Then there's a shift in the breeze, a chill that wasn't there before, cold and crisp where it drags playful tendrils through his hair and across his nape. There's a soft rumbling sound, almost like a chuckle, just on the edge of hearing. Something he feels and understands, even if he can't quite pick up the sound. Cosmo lifts his head from where he is curled at Keith's feet, staring at the figure that moves into Keith's peripheral vision. His ears are perked forward, head cocked and curious, eyes sharp and intelligent, but he doesn't move to get up. His hackles don't rise, not even the growl. In fact, after a brief inspection, he huffs a short breath and lays his head back down, eyes still open and watching, but otherwise relaxed. Key takes it as a good spin. He's not coming back, Lance says, voice soft but conversational. Smooth as a crisp breeze that has Keith shivering. He stands with his hands in the pockets of his jacket, eyes distant as he stares down the small hill into the lake beyond. Who? Lance nods toward the still waters. The Kelpie. His head tilts then, eyes sliding to Keith's, lips tugging up into a small lopsided smile. That's why you're here, isn't it? To make sure he doesn't prey on anyone else? Keith shrugs, letting his gaze drift away. It's a nice day to sit in a park, despite the fact that Shira has asked you to avoid this place. I've never been great at taking orders. Lance lets out a short puff of air that sounds suspiciously like a laugh. The sound tugs at something in Keith's chest, rising to push at the corners of his lips. But it only lasts a second, and then reality sets in, causing his blooming smile to wilt. He glances sideways, eyes narrowed. How do you know what Shira told me? Lance shrugs, moving around the bench to sit. There's still a foot or two of distance between them as they sit on opposite sides. Yet there's something about it that feels far too informal and far too intimate, and something about him that feels far too comfortable sitting and chatting with this Fae. Shiro tells me things, he says vaguely. Is that why you weren't surprised that I knew what the Kelpie was doing? Or that I knew it was Kelpie at all? He keeps his voice low, but his question pointed. Watch his Lance's face closely. Did Shiro tell you? There's a flash of something in Lance's eyes, but it's gone before Key can identify it. Locked away behind a smooth wall of glass, sculpted into the perfect picture of innocent indifference. He looks away slowly, casually, shoulder lifting and falling in a half-hearted shrug. More or less. Keith frowns, lifts purse tight in his pockets, his hands curl into fists, nails biting into his palm. You know, I've been around Cheryl long enough to know when fairies are avoiding questions. Lance remains facing forward, but his eyes cut to Keith's. His lips tilt in a devilish smirk. Amusement dances in the warm blue depths of his eyes. Then you also know that getting a straight truth when we don't want to answer a question is harder than it seems. Keith can't help the scoff that leaves his lips, nor the roll of his eyes when he thinks back to all the questions Cheryl had expertly avoiding throughout the years. Yeah, no. Lance looks away, but his grin lingers. He's not done with that line of questioning, but he knows better than to push a Fae when they're already guarding their answers. Better to ask again later. We get the truth out of them before they realize what he's doing. So instead, he asks, how are you so certain that the Kelpie won't come back? Lance remains in place, but it fades from his eyes. There's an edge to his words, and he answers. Because I told him to leave and not to return. And he listened to you? I claim this spark for the summer court, while the winter court can contest it. It can't be done by one so lowly as a Kelpie. He had no choice but to choose another hunting ground. Why would you do that? Keith asked, suspicion creeping into his chest, setting him on edge. His voice comes out far softer than intended. Because you're determined to continue to visit this park, he says matter of factly, shrugging as if it's of no bigger importance than a statement of the weather. At least this way, there are fewer dangers. The summer course is dangerous too, he counters, careful not to sound accusatory. He knows better than to insult a Fae he doesn't know, even if that Fae has a way of making him feel strangely comfortable in his presence. Lance chuckles, but the sound is deep and rumbling. His voice is wry as says, True, but they pose less of a threat to you than the Winter Court. Keith stiffens, hair on the back of his neck, standing on end as a shiver crawls across his skin. His blood prickles against his veins as his heart hiccups in his chest. Cosmo lifts his head, gazing at him curiously. He reaches out, cupping the wolf's head and digging his fingers smoothly through his fur. And what threat does the winter court pose to me? He asks, voice carefully neutral, other than the fact that they hate half-breeds. None, Lance says, voice steely with his certainty. Key glanced up in time to see his eyes flash, bright and clear as ice. Not as long as I have anything to say it. And why's that? Keith's fingers pause in his ministrations, and Cosmo whines. He turns to face Lance more fully, eyes searching his face. His skin looks warm in the sunlight, and a shimmering of glamour particularly concentrated on his sharp cheekbones, highlighting his eyes. Why do you care? Lance doesn't look at him, but his expression softens to something thoughtful, something almost forlorn. I've asked myself the same thing. And? Lance shrugs, hesitating as a wry smile tugs at his lips. I haven't found an answer yet. A silence stretches between them. Keith scratches behind Cosmo's ears, and the wolf's eyes drip shut. He isn't at all threatened in Lance's presence, which is strange. The only Fae he tolerates without suspicion is Shiro. A breeze rolls past them, warm with the midday sun, crisp and clean. He can hear the sound of children playing in the distance, the low hum of traffic on the streets around the park, the rhythmic footfalls of runners. Keith sighs, not so much with exasperation as simple exhaustion. There's a there's a strange buzzing contentment in his chest, fighting off the weariness he knows he should have, but can't seem to summon. What do you want from me? Hmm? What do you want from me? He repeats, looking at Lance, a small frown pursing his lips. Lance lifts a brow, face carefully blank. And if I said I want nothing? He gives a sharp shake of his head. I wouldn't believe you. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. And if I said I wanted to get to know you? He hubs and exhales. I wouldn't believe you. He loses his battle with a smile, shrugging slightly. It doesn't matter if you believe me or not. That's why I'm here. He blinks. To get to know me? Yes. Why? You're interesting. It says so casually, so matter-of-factly, with a light honesty that Keith isn't used to hearing from Faye. It has a strange prickle of warmth sitting down his spine. Um, really not. You are. Lance pulls a hand out of his pocket, holding a full piece of paper between two fingers. He holds it up to Keith, a small smile on his lips that crinkles at the corner to his eyes. And despite how dangerous you are, I like to get to know you. He's heard that before, that the Fae considers half-breeds to be dangerous. He's never quite understood it, not when they're clearly far more powerful, vicious, and vindictive. Still, he doesn't question it. Instead, he stares at the paper between Lance's fingers. What's that? For you, he says, extending his hand further. Keith said, I'm not taking anything from you. He knows this game. She has drilled the dangers of it into him since he was young. Never accept anything from a Fae. Accepting the gift can be seen as accepting an open-ended deal, and that's definitely something he doesn't want. Lance huffs out a sigh, rolling his eyes. as his entire body slouches with what is a clear display of exasperation, not entirely the graceful composure Keith has come to expect from his kind. It's not a gift, but fine. Have it your way. He sets the piece of paper on the bench between them, holding it in place with his finger for a moment, while he meets Keith's gaze with determined eyes and a purse of his lips. I'll just bend on this here, and it can be picked up without consequence. What is it? A way to contact me. His expression softens, voice lowering to a mere bet. If you like to. And then all at once, his features scrunch up, nose wrinkling and lip curling. I haven't quite figured it all out yet, but Hunk tells me that I'll get the hang of it. Keith blinks, brows furrowing. You know, Hunk? A new light enters Lance's eyes, a smile once more making its home on his lips. He leans toward Keith, voice low as he tilts his chin, gazing up at Keith through his lashes. I suppose you will have to text me if you want more answers. With a wink, he leans back, lifting his finger from a piece of paper. He pushes himself to his feet, hands once more buried in the pocket of his jacket. I'll see you around, Keith. He walks away, and Keith watches him go. His name on a man's lips had sounded soft and familiar, sending waves of something surging through his chest. He never told Lance his name, but he's willing to bet Cheryl had. Still, there's a bigger question to Keith's mind. Text you? He looks down, only wrestling with his curiosity for a brief moment, before picking up a piece of paper. Inside he finds a phone number, and he stares at it for a long moment as the pieces start to settle in. But there are far too many gaps to form a complete picture. Lance, a fairy, has a phone? He doesn't know what to make of it, of any of it, of Lance himself or the conversation. He glances back down the path, but Lance is nowhere in sight. He slept with a strange mix of dread and anticipation coiling in his chest. There's something about Lance that Keith can't quite put a finger on. Something that nibbles at his curiosity and runs circles in his mind, restless and agitated, like grasping for a word on the tip of his tongue, just out of his reach. He doesn't know a thing about Lance, but he could find out. He's not at all surprised to realize what he wants to find out. As he glances down at the piece of paper in his hand, his eyes catch on something else. There, nestled against at the foot of the bench, grown from the worn park dirt, is a small cluster of forget-me-nots. And that is the end of chapter 1, everybody. So that is fantastic. That final scene, this is where getting to know Lance wanted to get to know Keith better because he's really interesting to Keith. But I'm not sure Keith would trust Lance because of getting the doubts of the fairies. I mean, he would doubt that the fairies cannot trust the half breeds, just like Keith. But Lance is different. He really wants to get to know Keith because of we wanted to start it. So Lance left the piece of paper, which is his name and a phone number he wanted to call or text. So that's a getting way to start, getting to know who this Faye is and leaving everything behind from it. Oh well. So getting we're just getting started right now for this chapter. And I hope you guys enjoy with this video of just me reading this. So alright. That is the end of this video. I will see you on the next chapter once we settle all of this. Okay. Goodbye everyone.